For nearly 8 decades, aviation fans and historians have debated one burning question: which piston-engine fighter was truly the fastest of World War II? Today, we're putting that argument to rest, using only verified test results, wartime records, and official speed trials. What follows is a countdown of the 8 fastest propeller-driven fighters that actually took to the skies during the war. These machines weren't fantasy blueprints or test hangar experiments. They were real aircraft, built in numbers, flown in combat, and pushed to their absolute limits by pilots fighting for survival. Each of these warbirds represents the height of mechanical ingenuity, born from desperation and determination to control the air in the deadliest conflict in human history. So, buckle in as we count down from number 8 to the ultimate speed champion of 1945. Number 8. Germany's Focke-Wulf FW-190D9. With a top speed of 426 miles per hour, this sleek, long-nosed fighter, nicknamed the Dora, marked a bold leap forward from the earlier FW-190 models that had been terrorizing Allied airmen since 1941. The D9 swapped its bulky BMW radial engine for a streamlined Jumo 213A inline engine, which required a longer nose and gave it that instantly recognizable silhouette. The change didn't just alter its looks, it transformed its performance, turning the FW-190 from a rugged, low-level dogfighter into a high-altitude predator capable of challenging Allied bombers head-on. Production began in August 1944, and by the end of the war, more than 700 units had rolled off the assembly lines. Luftwaffe pilots praised its balance of power, roll rate, and durability, qualities that made the FW-190D9 not just fast, but one of the finest fighters Germany ever built. In the closing months of World War II, Germany's Dora 9 faced the impossible, taking to the skies against waves of Allied bombers and fighters that vastly outnumbered it. Yet, even in defeat, it earned its place in aviation history for its speed, grace, and resilience under pressure. At number 7, we cross the Channel to Britain and meet the Hawker Tempest Mk5, a machine that could tear through the air at 435 miles per hour. Born as an evolution of the rugged Typhoon, the Tempest was refined to perfection. A thinner wing design and a monstrous Napier Sabre engine gave it unmatched low-altitude power and blistering acceleration. It entered service in April 1944, just in time for one of its most critical missions, stopping Germany's terrifying V-1 flying bombs. At low altitude, the Tempest became the RAF's deadliest interceptor, destroying more than 800 of the pilotless missiles before they could reach their targets. Pilots soon discovered a risky but ingenious trick, closing in beside a V-1 and using the wingtip to flip it off balance, sending it crashing harmlessly to the ground. But the Tempest wasn't just a bomber chaser. In dogfights, it was a predator. Fast, agile, and heavily armed, it shredded German aircraft with ruthless efficiency. During the Allied push into Europe, Tempest squadrons earned some of the best kill ratios of the entire war. Many British pilots swore by it, calling it the finest piston engine fighter ever built by Britain. And that brings us to number 6. The legendary Supermarine Spitfire Mk14, clocking in at 446 miles per hour, the final and fiercest evolution of the fighter that had saved Britain in its darkest hour. But the Spitfire Mk42T was no simple upgrade. It was a complete transformation. Beneath its elegant lines roared the Rolls-Royce Griffon 65. A powerhouse delivering more than 2,000 horsepower, nearly double what the early Merlin engines produced. That surge in strength meant engineers had to reinforce the airframe and enlarge the tail surfaces to handle the immense torque. The payoff? A Spitfire that could climb like a rocket, dive faster than ever, and dominate at altitudes where earlier models gasped for air. First taking flight in January 1943 and entering service in early 1944. The MiG-14 quickly proved it wasn't just another Spitfire, it was a new breed. Against Germany's latest fighters, it held its own with ease, and its blistering speed made it one of the few Allied aircraft capable of chasing down high-altitude reconnaissance planes and even German jets. For enemy pilots used to escaping the older Spitfires, the MiG-14 was a shock. Its Griffin engine delivered brutal acceleration, and its presence in the skies signaled that Britain's finest fighter had reached its ultimate form. More than 900 units were built, each one serving with distinction through the war's final battles. Before we move into the top 5 fastest fighters of World War II, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Which aircraft do you think deserves the #1 spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're enjoying this journey through aviation history, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. Now, let's keep climbing. At number 5 sits America's muscular Grumman F-8F Bearcat, a beast capable of 455 miles per hour. Built to be the ultimate lightweight carrier fighter, the Grumman F-8F Bearcat was America's answer to one simple challenge: how fast and powerful could a plane be while still launching from the tiny decks of escort carriers? These jeep carriers had been crucial in the Pacific, and Grumman's engineers wanted to give them a fighter that could dominate the skies. They started with the monster Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, delivering over 2,100 horsepower, and wrapped it in the smallest, lightest airframe possible. The result was astonishing. The Bearcat could rocket to 10,000 feet in just 94 seconds, a climb rate no other American fighter of its time could touch. It wasn't just fast, it was agile. Its roll rate was razor-sharp, and despite its compact size, it carried a serious punch, either 4 20mm cannons or 6 50-caliber machine guns. But fate wasn't on its side. Entering service in February 1945, the Bearcat arrived too late to see combat. By the time Japan surrendered that August, only 24 aircraft had reached frontline squadrons. Still, every pilot who flew it called it a dream machine, the finest handling piston fighter ever built. After the war, it became the pride of the U.S. Navy's Blue Angels, and its blistering performance shattered multiple time-to-climb records that stood for decades. Now, at number 4, we return to Germany for one of the most remarkable and tragic fighters of the war, the Focke-Wulf Ta 152H, capable of an incredible 469 miles per hour. This high-altitude interceptor was Germany's final gamble to stop the relentless waves of Allied bombers flying above 30,000 feet, far beyond the reach of most Luftwaffe fighters, with wings stretched nearly 48 feet across, a pressurized cockpit, and a Jumo 203E engine fitted with a 2-stage supercharger. The Ta 152H could soar and fight at altitudes over 40,000 feet, where other planes could barely breathe. Up there, it could outclimb, outrun, and outmaneuver nearly anything that dared challenge it. But like so many of Germany's late war marvels, it came too late. Production began in November 1944, and only about 150 were ever built. Few made it into combat, but those that did left a deep impression on the Allied pilots who faced them. On April 14, 1945, Luftwaffe ace Oberfeldwebel Willy Reschke took his TA 152H to the skies over Germany and met 4 American P-51 Mustangs head-on at high altitude. Against all odds, he shot down 2 and crippled a third, then vanished back into the clouds. It was a moment that proved what the aircraft was truly capable of, if only it had come sooner. The Ta 152H embodied Germany's last, desperate grasp at technological superiority. It was brilliant on paper, fast, powerful, and beautifully engineered, but it arrived in a nation running out of fuel, trained pilots, and functioning airfields. What could have been a war-changing aircraft in 1943 became little more than a tragic what-if by 1945. Now, number 3 takes us back across the Atlantic to the United States, and one of the most rugged fighters ever built, the Republic P-47M Thunderbolt, a monster capable of 472 miles per hour. Nicknamed the Jug, the Thunderbolt was already famous for its toughness and firepower. But the P-47M was a different breed. This special, high-speed variant was designed for one purpose: to hunt down and destroy Germany's new generation of fast, high-altitude fighters and jets that had begun menacing the skies over Europe in late 1944. Engineers supercharged its heart, a Pratt & Whitney R2800-57 engine with a redesigned turbocharger, water injection system for bursts of emergency power, and weight reductions across the airframe. The transformation was staggering. The P-47M became one of the fastest piston engine fighters ever fielded. Only 130 were built, and they went exclusively to the 56th Fighter Group, the legendary unit that had specifically requested a Thunderbolt capable of chasing jets. Early on, its powerful engine was temperamental, prone to breakdowns that kept squadrons grounded. But once engineers fixed those issues, the P-47M was unleashed, and it tore through the skies. It kept everything pilots loved about the Thunderbolt: its armor, 8 heavy machine guns, and dive speed, but added raw velocity that rivaled any piston fighter Germany could put up. The 56th Fighter Group flew the P-47M until the very end of the war, claiming kills against both conventional aircraft and early jet fighters, sealing its place as one of the deadliest American warbirds ever built. The P-47M Thunderbolt marked the absolute edge of what engineers could squeeze from the legendary Jug. It was the final, fiery evolution of a design pushed right to its mechanical limits. Fast, powerful, and unstoppable. But now we move to number 2, and this one was truly unlike anything else in the skies. Germany's Dornier Do 335 Pfeil, meaning arrow, was an extraordinary machine that reached a blistering 474 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest piston engine aircraft ever built. What made the Do 335 so revolutionary was its push-pull engine configuration. Instead of placing engines on the wings, Dornier engineers mounted one Daimler-Benz DB603 engine in the nose and another behind the cockpit, driving a rear pusher propeller. The result? Twice the power, half the drag, and performance numbers that stunned anyone lucky enough to see it fly. This design gave the Arrow astonishing straight-line speed and stability, paired with heavy armament and armor that would have made it a deadly opponent in any dogfight. On paper, it was a perfect blend of speed, power, and innovation. But reality arrived too late. Delays meant the first prototype didn't take flight until October 1943, and production models only began to reach Luftwaffe test units in early 1945. By then, the war was collapsing around Germany. Only about 37 aircraft were ever completed, and none saw real combat. Still, post-war evaluations confirmed what the data already suggested. The Do 335 was an engineering masterpiece. It was fast beyond belief, stable at high speeds, and beautifully designed. Yet it stood as a symbol of both German ingenuity and desperation, an aircraft born too late to change the course of history. Allied test pilots who got their hands on captured Do 335s after the war were astonished. They praised its light, precise handling, its smooth acceleration, and called it one of the greatest piston engine fighters ever built. A machine that, had it arrived just 2 years earlier, might have rewritten the air war entirely. And now, we've reached number 1, the fastest propeller-driven fighter of World War II, the North American P-51 Mustang, clocking in at an incredible 487 miles per hour. This wasn't just another version of the famous Mustang. It was a complete reinvention. The P-51H represented the absolute pinnacle of American piston engine design, combining elegance, raw power, and unmatched efficiency. Engineers went back to the drawing board, stripping nearly 1,500 pounds from the P-51D through smarter materials, lighter construction, and a streamlined fuselage. Then they added the Packard V1650-9 engine, an American-built Rolls-Royce Merlin fitted with a water injection system for emergency bursts of power. The result was astonishing. A fighter that could almost touch 500 miles per hour in level flight. But the magic wasn't just in its speed. The reduced weight gave the P-51H razor-sharp agility. It could climb faster, roll quicker, and turn tighter than any previous Mustang, while still keeping its famous long-range endurance, over 850 miles on internal fuel. It could escort bombers deep into Japanese airspace and still outrun nearly any enemy fighter that dared to intercept. Production began in February 1945, and by the time Japan surrendered 6 months later, 555 aircraft had been delivered. Too late for Europe, and just in time for peace, the P-51H never saw combat. But it didn't need to. It stood as proof of how far propeller technology could go before the jet age took over. The P-51H Mustang wasn't just the fastest, it was the final, triumphant masterpiece of an era that pushed piston-powered flight to its ultimate limit. It was faster, lighter, and more capable than anything else ever powered by a piston engine. In a war that pushed aviation technology to its absolute limits, the P-51H Mustang stood proudly at the summit, the final word in propeller-driven speed and precision. These 8 fighters together mark the pinnacle of piston engine design. Machines, born in the fires of humanity's most desperate struggle. Each was crafted in a time when nations poured every ounce of their skill, courage, and imagination into gaining even the smallest edge in the sky. The engineers who designed them and the pilots who risked everything to fly them constantly pushed beyond what anyone thought was possible. What's incredible is just how close these aircraft truly were. From Germany's FW-190D9 at number 8 to America's P-51H Mustang at number 1, there's only a 61 mile per hour difference between them. Every single mile per hour came from painstaking testing, tiny refinements, and relentless innovation carried out under the pressure of war. Each fighter on this list was a masterpiece of its era, a blend of art and engineering where speed could mean the difference between life and death. Because while maneuverability, range, firepower, and pilot skill all mattered, in combat, there was one truth every flyer understood. Speed saves lives. Whether chasing down an enemy bomber before it reached its target, or escaping an overwhelming formation to fight another day, the fastest pilot often lived to tell the story. And now you know, the 8 fastest propeller fighters of World War II ranked by their documented performance. Do you agree with the list? Or do you think another warbird deserves a spot in the lineup? Tell me in the comments which fighter you believe was truly the fastest, and why.